Nirvana, A Study in Synthetic Consciousness by George S. Arundale, 2nd edition, revised and enlarged. Together with a new chapter, Theosophical Publishing House, ADR, Madras, India, 1927. First published, December 1926. 2nd edition, November 1927. To elder brothers Annie Besant and Charles Webster Leadbeater, by whose aid these experiences were possible, and to those in whom Nirvana shines revealed forward, I have been asked by my lifelong friend Bishop Arundale to write a few words of introduction to his book. I consider it a very remarkable production, a valiant attempt to describe the indescribable. Few among men still living on earth are they who have experienced Nirvana. Fewer still have made any endeavor to record their impressions. Those of us who have touched that truly tremendous altitude know well that all human words fall short in the effort, that all earthly colors are hopelessly inadequate to depict its supernal glories, yet must we try, even though we are foredoomed to failure. That which is given to us we must share with our brethren, so far as may be, for that is the law of the occult life. In obedience to that law this book is written. I have myself tried to convey in words something of that super-celestial atmosphere, as you may read in the Masters and the Path, but I think my brother Bishop has been more successful, and there is a living fire in his words. True, that which he has seen cannot be portrayed, yet the enthusiasm which he throws into the essay is so infectious that we feel ourselves on the very verge of understanding. Much of upliftment, much of help he certainly can and does give us. If we cannot yet know all, at least we are nearer to the knowing, at least we are encouraged by the testimony of one who already knows. And where he stands now, all will stand one day. So let us unite in outpouring our heartfelt gratitude for this rare book which he has given us, and the best way in which we can show it is to aid him, and to follow him in the splendid work which he is doing in the service of our holy masters. C.W. Leadbeater, my son George, has asked me to add a few words to the above, written by one who knows. To try to describe Nirvana is as hopeless a task as to try to empty the ocean into a thimble. Yet it is one of the efforts that are made by heroes only. I recall the words spoken by one who greatly dared in the slower world, as marking the heroic enthusiast. It is better to climb nobly, and to fail, and ignobly not to climb at all. Annie Besant, VII. Author. As preface, I think I may say I have been a rather strenuous person for many years, for over 25 years now, under the inspiring guidance of my revered chief, Dr. Annie Besant, and my strenuousness has been very much on the physical plane. I confess to having thought little of what people call higher things, of causes and of origins, of theories of life, of planes of nature, of hierarchies of beings, and so forth. I have had work to do in the outer world, and I have tried to do it, and have not concerned myself with whys and wherefores. Whenever I have studied specifically to the immediate ends of a particular piece of work. I have never studied for study's sake. I have never cared for wisdom for what wisdom is, but for what wisdom can do. My universe is full of the things I need. If I could not relate a thing to my work, then that thing has been out of my perspective, at all events for the time being. I have been one-pointed, even though I may have turned my eyes from much upon which they might usefully have rested. But during the last year or so I have been making a discovery. I have discovered that however much I may have been strenuous on the physical plane, this physical plane strenuousness has been almost as nothing compared with my strenuousness on other planes. This is probably the case with everybody, but it came as a great surprise to me on the physical plane. I began at once to realize that I must cease to live in these plane-type compartments. I must begin to live on many planes simultaneously. I began to realize that the one life unites all planes and all things, and that in reality there is nothing which should be indifferent to me. Everything is related to everything else, and everything modifies everything else. Why, the far distant sun himself presses physically upon every part of the world, as science itself teaches us. So I brooded much upon this unity, both in and out of the body, and tried to live more from the universal and from the particular. The result has been, I hope, bigger living, more effective living. But I had no clear perception of unity, only a sense of it, a vague idea of it just sufficient to make life strangely and intriguingly different. Many years ago, it was in 1912, at Taormina, Sicily, I had my first glimpse of the fundamental unities. I remember sitting at the window of my room in the hotel in which a party of us were staying, and I was listlessly dreaming. All of a sudden my half-non-seeing eyes rested on the orange grove in the little valley beneath, and I found myself peculiarly, wonderfully, identified with the orange trees, with their very life and being. I was at my window, yet was I also in the orange grove. Indeed, I was the orange grove. It was almost as if my consciousness flickered between George Arundale as George Arundale and George Arundale as the orange grove. I was two entities, yet one. And as I lived as the orange grove, a gardener entered, and began to pluck some of the oranges, and to cut off some of the branches. All these things the gardener was doing to me I rebelled not as George Arundale might rebel, not with my mind and my will, but as orange groves apparently do rebel. I was conscious of discomfort, of loss, not exactly of pain, but of something next door's eye to it. I was the more discomforted because the gardener did not treat me reverently or affectionately, but as if I were inanimate with no feelings, with no capacity for sensation. Why could he not realize that the same life was in us both? If he had only had the attitude of asking my permission, of begging my pardon for his actions, of conveying to me that I could make others happy by sharing myself with them, I should not have minded so much. But he was callous, selfish, and treated the orange grove as a slave instead of as a comrade. He hurt me every time he plucked an orange or cut off a branch. With a different attitude on his part, he might have had all my oranges, all my branches, and we might have rejoiced together, for we could have worked together. As it was, being at his mercy, and treated as his chattel, life was only just worth living, and I was a poor orange grove because uncared for. This experience of consciousness in the vegetable kingdom opened before my eyes an entirely new conception of consciousness at different levels of unfoldment, and of the implications of the all-embracing unity. I have never been the same since. I have never been able to pluck a flower, or even to uproot a wheat, without as it were silently explaining my reasons to the plant, or to the wheat, requesting a sacrifice for some definite, I will not necessarily say larger, good, and I have never found any lack of cooperation. Interestingly enough, I always feel that I must justify my actions to the life which I am thereby affecting, and for this very reason I am more than ever a vegetarian. How can I explain, how can I have the face to explain, to sheep or cattle, to birds or fishes, that I ask them to sacrifice themselves, with an inevitable accompaniment of much suffering, simply to gratify my palate, or because I myself suffer from the delusion that I cannot live without eating flesh food? To make such a request is grossly, disgustingly selfish, and though I can behave, if I choose, like a robber or pirate, and steal by force, still there is fortunately just enough of the honorable gentleman about me, at least in this particular direction, to cause me utterly to decline to make so monstrous a demand, whereby I must inevitably lower the dignity of the kingdom to which I belong. Making the subhuman kingdoms wonder what kind of evolution it is that causes those who I should know better to prey upon those who cannot resist force, whose only defense is their right to live. From time to time I have had other visions of this glorious unity, but none so inexpressible as that which marked the opening of the doors of Nirvana to the knock I had learned to give. One night I suddenly awoke with the most vivid remembrance of a supreme exaltation, of a marvelous expansion of consciousness, absolutely indescribable, though then and there I felt I must somehow or other record it on paper. It was about 1 a.m., and part of me was very much disinclined to take the trouble to sit up and write, even though pencil and paper were by my bedside, as has been my habit, for some time in case an idea came during the fruitful hours, when sleep minimizes physical interference. But another part of me insisted. So I sat up and wrote that with which this book begins, and I remember hearing, "This is Nirvana." And I knew it was Nirvana. I was immensely astonished, I confess, for I had never before given a thought to Nirvana, at all events on the physical plane. What I wrote was very strange to me at first. My waking consciousness was not accustomed to reflect Nirvana consciousness, and the process of remembrance was physically painful. However, I wrote down all that came to me, and my pencil found it exceedingly difficult to travel at the rate at which the thoughts poured through. I could hardly read my own handwriting, so fast I wrote, and certainly I hardly knew what I was writing. I wrote for hours, and was all aglow with exaltation. the whole of my being seemed reoriented. I was born again, and when the day came I found all changed. A new note had been sounded in my being, new values had come to everything, and since then I have been occupied in readjusting me so that I may gradually blend my old world with my new world. Practically the whole of the book had been written either between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. or between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., and many nights have been passed in the physically painful, though spiritually wonderfully uplifting, process of striving to hold a reflection of nirvana in the physical brain and in the waking consciousness. Needless to say, even the most beautiful description of nirvana which could be conceived out here must inevitably be nothing less than a caricature of nirvana, as it in reality is. What then must my poor efforts be? It is almost a blasphemy to publish them, even as a feeble attempt to indicate a shadow of nirvanic glories. They fall indescribably short of the reality. Yet it seems to be better to have even these than nothing, and many who have read some extracts have felt an upliftment. With Bishop Leadbeater's encouragement, therefore, this book is issued as a poor sketch by an unpracticed hand, conveyed through deadening media of a world of incomparable glories. I ought to add that even the glories I know can only be those of the very lowest subplane of nirvana, and even then only a few of the glories of this subplane, for I have only just been born into nirvana, and have yet to develop the senses appropriate to my new world. As time passes, however, more and more of nirvanic consciousness penetrates my being, and it is as if I had begun a stupendous journey from the great resurrection to an ascension, the glories of which are as different from those of nirvana as is the sun from our earth. I hope the account of my own experiences will help others to contact this royal consciousness of nirvana. It is within the near reach, no doubt, of many, while some today, and many in days gone by, have known nirvana, as I can only hope to know it after long effort and concentration. My own description is not, of course, of nirvana, as it actually is, even on the lowest subplane. It is of nirvana as it has appeared to me, of as much of nirvana as I have been able to assimilate. Much of the description is doubtless colored by my personality. Another description, totally different, might well be quite as true, possibly far more true. I can only say I have done the best I could with the powers at my disposal, and I am well aware that the narrative is in many ways made up of a number of disconnected parts. The reason for this is that I have written night after night, as I was moved to write, without thought of what I had already written. Each section is, therefore, the pen impression of a particular vision of a Nirvanic landscape, just as it impressed itself upon me at the time. George S. Arundale XVI note to the second edition. I am naturally gratified that after a few months a second edition of Nirvana is demanded. I think the value of the little book has been more in the direction of suggestion as to lines of experiment and as a description of the conditions obtaining under the nirvanic mode of consciousness. Frankly, the reader will find little description, for description is impossible, but he will find many impressions, and my advice to him is to pay just as much or as little attention as he feels disposed to the details of the various impressions, and to concentrate on the atmosphere of which they are particular expressions as the result of the medium, George Arundale, through which the atmosphere must needs filter. For example, I write of lightning standing still. A reader might well exclaim, "Ah, I think I know what you mean. I should not call it lightning, nor lightning standing still. I should call it so. And so that would be the kind of filtration XIXI should get from that self-same atmosphere which we both sense, but which I should describe so differently. Let nirvana help you to nirvana, be your road what it may. All I can say is that I happen to take a route which I have described as best I could in the following pages. With this latitude open to every reader, there is one door I want to shut in his face, and that is the door of common sense. If you have nothing but common sense at your disposal, I am afraid nirvana will mean little or nothing to you. To understand either body or nirvana, distinctly uncommon sense is needed. Common sense will not help you in these regions any more than it will help you to understand modern physics since Einstein. Bertrand Russell tells us in his ABC of relativity that new kind of thinking must dawn upon our mental worlds as a result of the introduction of new conceptions and notions regarding physical things, even though these conceptions and notions be by no means yet entirely verified. He adjures us to start thinking in terms of these modern physical notions rather than in terms of the notions derived from common sense and embodied XX in traditional physics. That is exactly what has to be done by those who have contacted the outer fringes of Buddha and Nirvana. It is not common sense and the tradition of the lower worlds with which they are now concerned, but rather with an uncommon sense which is an extraordinarily refined sense, as yet extremely uncommon, but someday, to become common in its turn. Remember that the use of uncommon sense does not mean that we cease to be efficient in the lower worlds. On the contrary, we become far more efficient, for we build with stone, and not with sand. We live more truly because nearer to the real, even though in its signer ance, and common sense the outer world may laugh, ridicule, persecute, despise. Indeed, Bertrand Russell goes further than I should have dared to go, though by no means further than I should be prepared to go. In the following startling utterance taken from the same little book, it is possible that the desire for rational explanation may be carried too far. Every apparent law of nature which strikes us as reasonable is not really a law of nature, but a concealed convention, plastered onto nature by our love of what we, in our arrogance, choose to consider XX irrational. Eddington hints that a real law of nature is likely to stand out by the fact that it appears to us irrational, since in that case it is less likely that we have invented it to satisfy our intellectual taste. A profoundly true utterance which, had it been widely appreciated in times gone by and were widely appreciated today, would have saved many apostles of truth from persecution and martyrdom, and would enable the world to derive far more benefit than it does from the researches of occultists and mystics, true pioneers, true seekers, after real laws of nature through the irrational and superrational. I have made many corrections and a number of additions and modifications in this new edition, and I have added a new chapter, Further Thoughts, containing a few results of further meditations. I hope these also will prove interesting and provocative of pioneering in the same direction. GSAXXII Contents for Word. VE Author as Preface. X Note to the Second Edition. Zixi The First Glimpse. 1-2. The First Readjustment. 31-3. The Inner Light Upon Outer Things. 47-4. A Meditation in the Himalayas 68v Some Reflections. 95-6. The Awakening of Nirvana. 111. 7. The Theosophical Society. 124-8. The Immanence of Light. 133-9. A Further Readjustment. 163x Further Thoughts. 188-11. Mother Light. 207-12. The Dangers of Nirvana. 220-13. The Glorious Desk 229 Envoy. 241 APPENDICESA. 243B. 248C. 250-60. 264E. 266 Chapter I The First Glimpse Magnificent The Morning Rose, in memorable pomp. Glorious as I had beheld. In front the sea lay laughing at a distance, near the solid mountains shone, bright as the clouds, green tinctured, drenched in empyrean light, and, in the meadows, and the lower grounds was all the sweetness of a common dawn, dews, vapors, and the melody of birds and laborers going forth to till the fields. Ah, need I say, dear friend, that to the brim my heart was full. I made no vows, but vows were then made for me, bond unknown to me was given, that I should be, else sinning greatly, a dedicated spirit. On I walked, in thankful blessedness, which yet survives. Wordsworth, The Prelude, BKIV. My first remembrances of seeing the Master KH star. Those who have undergone occult training are aware how supremely magnificent, as a teacher is this great master. He is, of course, a high official in the world's education department, and apprentices from all departments have the honor to come under his inspiring guidance. I myself have had this honor, and, although I do not belong to the education department, I still have the inestimable privilege of his gracious guidance. It was a great joy to me to enter the new pathway, under the benevolent watchfulness of this gracious friend, to whom I owe so much, and it was a great joy, too, to make the entry with the help of the Master as representative in the outer world, our wonderful elder brother Bishop Leadbeater. Only those who have had CWL as teacher can possibly know all that a teacher can really be. The evil-minded and the ignorant traduce him, as it is their habit, to traduce others of his great line. But future generations shall rise up and call him blessed, while today there are many who count it their greatest joy to stand by his side, as his persecutors yelp at his heels. Looking as I had never seen him before, one radiant, he is always supremely radiant, but now he was more than radiant, and I cannot find a word down here to describe him and the glory in which I perceived him, with the first flash of Nirvana consciousness. Majestic and radiant are poor words. Blinding perhaps expresses it better, for just for a moment I was overwhelmed. I almost wanted to veil my face from sight of him, and yet I could not keep my eyes from him. So unfathomably splendid did he appear, only less glorious than the King Star, the supreme ruler of this world, the veritable king, within whose consciousness all things live, and move, and have their being. Some there are in the world who have seen him, but who can only gaze upon him as he veils his glory before their feeble eyes. He is indeed the lightning, in the light of which Nirvana is but shadow. And as the first glimpse comes of Nirvana, there comes with it the memory of an audience of the king, the marvelous stillness, then the blinding presence, and then the power to see. As I afterwards realized, though at the time no greater glory could I conceive, to I summon up my courage. I feel as if he were saying to me, welcome to a new kingdom which you must learn to conquer. In his power my consciousness unfolds, and I step, as it were, across a threshold into Nirvana. Words and phrases, however beautiful, however majestic, almost desecrate as they strive to describe conditions there. Even the faint touch of first experience of this lofty level dwarfs into insignificance all other experiences of all other planes, save only the entry into the presence of the one initiator. I remember my first glimpse of the Buddhic plane on the occasion of admission to the ranks of the Great White Brotherhood. I recall to this day my marveling at the vision of the Master in his Buddhic vehicle, and well do I remember in the days that followed the wondrous sense of unity with all things, with the trees and flowers, feeling with them all, growing with them and in them, suffering and rejoicing in and with them. I remember, too, the casting off of the friend of ages, the causal body, and 3. I remember a vivid rending contrast between the moment before and the moment after the glimpse into the new kingdom. I remember how it was, as if from out the sunshine I had suddenly entered a dark tunnel with a seemingly unending vista of blackness stretching infinitely far into a limitless beyond. Was there light at the end? I could see none. Must this blackness last forever? Well, be it as it may, I must enter this tunnel, for I can do no other. To quote the words of Luther, darkness enfolds me, blackness permeates me, shall I never again know light? Yet I look forward, and press onward. And at last the tunnel ends, the blackness vanishes, and I step into a light more glorious by far than the light I left. I had to let go the light I knew in order that I might enter into a light more real. It seems to be ever thus. That which we are ready to let go, to lose, we find unto life eternal. In the occultist there must be a spirit of daring, of adventure, of eagerness to risk. He must be willing to let the lesser go before he has grasped the greater. And in the interspace there is a momentary loneliness which must be borne happily and joyfully, for it is in loneliness that is born the power to strive, the strength to sustain and to protect. Those who cannot endure loneliness are not yet ready to be molded into leaders of men. But today the Master seems to me as one whom I have never known before, robed in the glories of a kingdom I am entering, as a little child. The new consciousness enfolds me, and in a moment my world is full of new, strange, glorious values. All is different, supremely different, though the same. A new divinity is opened to my eyes, and unfolds to my gaze a new meaning, a new purpose. It is the Buddhic unity transcended, glorified, a more marvelous unity. In some wonderful way it is merged in a state vaster and more tremendous. There is something even more true than the truth in the unity I have so far known, something more real. It seems impossible, and yet it is so. What is the nature of that of which even Buddhic glory is but a limitation? I must use words, and words seem a terrible anticlimax. I can only say it is the glory of light transcendent, a world of light which is the image of God's own eternity. Face to face do I seem to be with an unspotted mirror of his power, and with an image of his goodness. and the mirror, the image, is an endless ocean of light, in which I once again become, though five in one sense I already have been, merged by an apotheosis of at-one-ments on plane after plane, below. It is another baptism, another immersion into the waters of the real. At every stage of growth of baptism, to be succeeded by a confirmation, to be followed someday by an ordination, a consecration to, because an identification, whether complete or not, with the higher self. Brotherhood in the outer world, unity in the buddhic world, light transcendent in nirvana. And if on the threshold I am transported by its glory, how shall it be when I begin to ascend to the summit? Description falters even before this first lifting of the veil. Thought and feeling distort, and narrow infinitely. At best one can but suggest and hint. The rest is a matter of individual incommunicable experience. This light transcendent is even nearer to the real, and the buddhic unity which hitherto has seemed the most stupendous fact in all the world. Light the beginning, light the path, light the future. God said, "Let there be light," and there was, and is light, indescribable. Beautiful as is the light in the world, it is but the faint and feeble image of the light triumphant. The adjective somehow seems appropriate. Of these regions of the real six, it is the sunlight of the sun, ere it descends into the forms in which we know it. It is light purified of form. It is light which is the life of form. It is an ever-present intimation of immortality, of future, within the now, and thus eternal. It is I do not say the apotheosis and essence of the light we know. All the glory of the most wonderful dawn, and one feels nothing can be more wonderful than the perfect Eastern dawn, is brought to glorious fruition, and splendid perfection, in that eternal noonday which is nirvana. The glory of the buddhic plane is but the dawning of a nirvanic day. Yet, as I write these words, I remember knowing, as I stood awestruck upon the threshold of nirvana, that beyond even that, to me, supreme unfoldment lay unfathomable, immeasurable splendors, to which nirvana itself, the noonday of the buddhic dawning, is but, as a dawn, a promise, a shadow. I could sense this. I had to sense it to preserve my balance. I must hold fast to proportion even in these stupendous regions. That unity could be transcended I knew, for was not the light glory before my eyes? But there is more even than light glory. Some day in the far-off future I shall know a seven glory, that is even more than the glory of light. I call this light of nirvana the noonday of the buddhic dawn. But it is only noonday because for the time being it represents the utmost capacity of my consciousness. Same years ago the light of Buddhi was the noon. Today it is but dawn, glorious though it be. And there will come a time when the light of nirvana will be but dawn because I shall know another noon. It is because I live for the moment in the eternal that I can thus preserve my balance. I can perceive no ultimate noonday, even though I can perceive no other noonday than nirvana. I look back upon glorious dawns and upon glorious noondays. I see before me other noondays, before which this nirvanic noonday itself must pale into a dawn. Is there no limit to growth? None that I can perceive. And if I talk of dawns and noondays, are there also evenings, eventides, glorious evenings, evenings no less wonderful than the dawns, with light as beautiful as the light of dawn, as the light of noontime? I think there are. There are no nights, perhaps at least no blackness. But there comes from time to time a stillness, a hush, which is the silence of a consummation. There comes the hush, the silence, the stillness, just before a birth into a new region of light, just before a new dawn. It is not that the noonday light has lessened, but that a light more glorious still is beginning to shed its refulgence upon lesser light, so that it is as if a noontime had turned to evening by reason of contrast with the greater glory to be. And in that evening, in that hush which is the shadow of a greater glory, the neophyte gathers up reverently the powers he has gained, to use them in the conquest of the new kingdom of light, about to appear above the horizon. God is light, light is God. Man is light. All is light. A new meaning to the ancient Egyptian exhortations. Look for the light. Follow the light. Perceive and learn to be at one with the light of God in all things. I look upon the world. I see the world in terms of light. God, light in manifestation in man, light, in rock light, in tree light, in creature light. All is light, a blinding glory, at the center, translated into color light, into sound light, into form light, into substance light, as it descends into ever-increasing manifestation. At the circumference light as we know it in the manifested universe, light 9 expressed in innumerable ways. At the center that glory which is beyond all form, all color, all substance. Yet the circumference is but the center externalized, so there is the blinding glory everywhere, the God light, the blazing seed of futurity, in each individual thing, in every kingdom star compare, in this connection, that very interesting book Color Music, The Art of Light, by A.B. Klein. Crosby Lockwood and Son, London. The light seed unfolds its essence, its being, and becomes a world, a universe. In each kingdom of nature, 7 great pathways of light, potential in each kingdom, in the beginning, unfolding into glorious fruition, at the close. I see the diamond, the ruby, the emerald, the sapphire, kings of the mineral kingdom, superb in the perfection of their colors. Yet at the bottom these glories exist, imprisoned, slowly being released through the evolutionary process until they stand free and splendid as the kingdom's jewels. May I quote here a beautiful passage from Ruskin's The Ethics of the Dust, in which he describes the glorious pathway of evolution, in the mineral kingdom, the light in prison becoming the light free, thence to enter into 10 higher tabernacles, to tread pathways no less glorious, and virtually identical in process. A pure holy state of anything is that in which all its parts are helpful or consistent. The highest and first law of the universe, and the other name of life, is, therefore, help. The other name of death is separation. Government and cooperation are in all things, and eternally, the laws of life. Anarchy and competition, eternally, and in all things, the laws of death. Perhaps the best, though the most familiar, example we could take of the nature and power of consistence, will be that of the possible changes, in the dust we tread on. Exclusive of animal decay, we can hardly arrive at a more absolute type of impurity, and the mud or slime of a damp over-trodden path. In the outskirts of a manufacturing town. I do not say mud of the road, because that is mixed with animal refuse, but take merely an ounce or 2 of the blackest slime of a beaten footpath on a rainy day, near a manufacturing town. That slime we shall find in most cases composed of clay, or brick dust, which is burnt clay, mixed with soot, a little sand, and water. All these elements are at helpless war with each other, and destroy reciprocally each other as nature and power, competing, and fighting for place at every tread of your foot, sand squeezing out clay, and clay squeezing out water, and soot meddling everywhere, and defiling the whole. Let us suppose that this ounce of mud is left in perfect rest, and that its elements gather together, like to 11, so that their atoms may get into the closest relations possible. Let the clay begin. Ridding itself of all foreign substance, it gradually becomes a white earth, already very beautiful, and fit, with help of congealing fire, to be made into finest porcelain, and painted on, and be kept in kings' palaces. But such artificial consistence is not its best. Leave it still quiet, to follow its own instinct of unity, and it becomes, not only white, but clear, not only clear, but hard, not only clear and hard, but so set that it can deal with light, in a wonderful way, and gather out of it the loveliest glories only, refusing the rest. We call it then a sapphire. Such being the consummation of the clay, we give similar permission of quiet to the sand. It also becomes, first a white earth, then proceeds to grow clear and hard, and at last arranges itself in mysterious, infinitely fine parallel lines, which have the power of reflecting, not merely the rays, but the blue, green, purple, and red rays, in the greatest B, in which they can be seen through any hard material whatsoever. We call it then an opal. In next order the soot sets to work. It cannot make itself white at first, but, instead of being discouraged, tries harder and harder, and comes out clear at last, and the hardest thing in the world, and for the blackness that it obtains in exchange the power of reflecting all the rays of the sun at once, in the vivid displays that any solid thing can shoot. We call it then a diamond. 12 Last of all, the water purifies, or unites itself, contented enough if it only reach the form of a dewdrop, but, if we insist on its proceeding to a more perfect consistence, it crystallizes into the shape of a star. And for the ounce of slime which we have by political economy of competition, we have by political economy of cooperation, a sapphire, an opal, and a diamond, set in the midst of a star of snow. I have asked you to hear that, children, because, from all that we have seen in the work and play of these past days, I would have you gain at least one grave and enduring thought. The seeming trouble, the unquestionable degradation, of the elements of the physical earth must passively wait the appointed time of their repose, or their restoration. It can only be brought about for them by the agency of external law. But if, indeed, there be a nobler life in us than in these strangely moving atoms, if, indeed, there is an eternal difference between the fire which inhabits them and that which animates us, it must be shown, by each of us in his appointed place, not merely in the patience, but in the activity of our hope, not merely by our desire, but our labor, for the time, when the dust of the generations of men shall be confirmed for foundations of the gates of the city of God. The human clay, now trampled and despised, will not be, cannot be, knit into strength and light by accidents or ordinances of unassisted fate. By human cruelty and iniquity it has been afflicted, by human mercy and justice it must be raised, and, in all fear, or questioning of what is, or is not, the real message of creation, or of revelation, you 13 may assuredly find perfect peace, if you are resolved to do that which your Lord has plainly required, and content that he should indeed require. No more of you, than to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with him. In every kingdom it is the same. The free time after time realizing its imprisonment, because it has conquered its kingdom, and bursting its bonds afresh that is still mightier, and more splendid freedom may be achieved. The flower of every kingdom and unfolded color glory, sound glory, substance glory, form glory, passing thence to win the nobler freedom. Of course, the word imprisonment is hardly accurate, for there is probably little, if any, sense of imprisonment, until the prison doors are about to be opened that the soul may enter into a bondage less restricted. Fortunately for us, we generally see our prisons only, as we leave them. Until then a prison is an opportunity. Let us beware of so missing our opportunities that bondage takes their place, and a veritable prison house closes upon us. Another image in my consciousness is of a light nucleus, imprisoned lightning, charged with the spirit of divinity as a sun, below the horizon of the world, or of a kingdom of nature, or of an individual member of a 14 kingdom of nature, as the evolutionary process in each case begins. All is darkness and silently still. Life sleeps on the bosom of the infinite. Higher and higher ascends the nucleus of light, radiating ever upwards and outwards. Life stirs into activity, the world awakes. The dawn is at hand. A faint light glows, the rose of light, as tenderness softly touching the eyes of the sleeping world. From out the dawn in its tenderness comes the dawn in its iridescent vigor, a wonderful aurora of color, a veritable spectrum of light. And then all colors bend before their Lord and Master, merging themselves in him. The sun has risen, and passes onwards to the glory of a perfect day. The perfect dawn is the light which is body, but Nirvana is the light which is the day, not yet the eternal noontide, but a partial consummation of the dawn. Thus my image in terms of color light. But it comes to me in terms of sound light. First, the soft note expressing the divine essence, the key note, or basic tone of the individuality, whatever it may be, the note which gives the individuality. Then the mystic chord, swelling, as it were out of the single sound, the nature chord of the individuality. And so on into an equally veritable 15 spectrum of sound, an aurora of music, a great and majestic symphony declaring in terms of music the new goal to be achieved. A hush of soundless silence in which the glorious music of an achievement is marvelously merged, so that the very silence has become more vibrant, the voice of the silence has gained articulateness. In the hush, sound stirs once more to greater ends, and as time passes unfolds from archetypal note to mystic chord, from mystic chord to magic symphony, and then again that silence, in which the symphony is blended, which it has enriched. Can you not hear your own growth in terms of color, in terms of music? Can you not hear the faint beginnings, can you not presense the mighty ends? I have heard the beginnings of Nirvana in terms of sound, in terms of color. And I seem to hear as if far away in deep distance the symphony of the achievement of Nirvana, as I can dimly perceive the apotheosis of that light which even at the outset is so hopelessly indescribable. Is there not a note which sounds the beginning of the birth into the mysteries of the real? Is there not a symphony which marks its fruition, a symphony gathered up into a silence and issuing forth therefrom, as the note of a new endeavor, the note of a baptism? Is there 16 not the note and symphony of the transfiguration, the note and symphony of a crucifixion, resurrection, of an ascension, and of consecrations yet beyond? And so with light. Lose yourselves, my readers, now and then at least in these reachings into the real, bathe yourselves in these true imaginings. So do you gain a glimpse and an understanding of the eternal and of the inevitable. Glory beyond those contrasts which seem in times so dark and dreary, but which thus serve to teach us of the sunshine everlasting. Out of sleep and dream I am awake, though to regions beyond I may still be dreaming. But the dream is true, for it is the vision of the final conquest of the kingdom of man, and the standing upon the threshold of the kingdoms of the Superman. Let me try to put my vision otherwise. I look upon the world, and I see our Lord the Sun expressed in myriad suns. Each monad I perceive to be a sun in many a teury. The Sun divine throws off spark suns charged with all his attributes. The process of evolution begins, and these sparks burst into color, or rather gradually unfold in terms of color, rainbows with sun hearts, or nuclei or centers. Goddess light thus imprisoned in form begins its long pathway 17 of transcending form, thus acquiring self-consciousness. Every atom of light is an atom of unconscious divinity, slowly but surely fulfilling the will of the Sun, that it shall become unfolded into self-conscious divinity. Every atom is a sun unconscious, and shall become a sun self-conscious. And the Sun, light, which is the light that is free, shines upon the sunlight, which is the light imprisoned, like the wanderer in the darkness, until the light within and the light without blend into a perfect whole, earth-like kissing heaven light, and becoming sunlight. Bathed in the lightning standing still which is Nirvana, I perceive the imprisoned lightnings in all things. I perceive the light which is self-savage, the light which is bright, the man evolved, the light which is glory, the Superman, the master. I see color everywhere in process of transmutation, of glorification, of transcendence. There is no blackness anywhere in the sense of a negation of light. God said, "Let there be light." And there was, and is light everywhere. His light shineth even in our darkness. And as before I might express my vision in terms of sound, of music, in terms of 18 gloriously growing forms. For, as time passes, I begin to perceive that while my first impression found instant expression in the word light, and specially in the phrase lightning standing, still, I now know that this light conception is but a quality of Nirvana, an aspect, a facet of the diamond sphere. In truth, Nirvana is an essence of things, and a flower of things. It is an alpha and an omega. I am gradually, though only very, very slowly, beginning to look for Nirvana in all things. I cannot say that I have found Nirvana in all things, but I think I have reached the point of at least knowing that Nirvana is there. I know, though I do not yet perceive. I may, perhaps, best describe to you this knowledge in terms of light, or it may be in terms of sound, or in terms of form. But Nirvana is beyond all these. Nirvana is a mode of being, a mode that transcends light and sound and form, though shadowed at least in all that we can know down here of the most glorious light, sound, and form. Have you tried to transcend the farthest limits of your consciousness? Have you ever striven to rise, first measurably, and then almost immeasurably, above and beyond yourself? Have you 19 ever tried to know your bondage, and then burst the bonds? Have you ever recognized your limitations, your many weaknesses, and have you then ever known yourself as having triumphed over them, so that you have become unrecognizable to yourself as well as to others? Must you reach after Nirvana, however long may be the road on which you have to travel? Light, yes. Sound, yes. Even form, from out the formless, yes. But Nirvana is a mighty spiritual essence of all these things, and you approach it by learning to transcend yourself, to be an alchemist transmuting marvelously the lower into the higher. Awake. Arise. Know that Nirvana is your very being, and therefore realize yourself. Everywhere in Goddess workshop of the world, master painters, master singers, master sculptors, master builders at work. Sun, light the common material. sunlight fashioned into forms, color forms, sound forms, forms of every kind, but all sun, light. And we are apprentices to these masters of crafts and fashion, after them in our childish ways. Yet we, too, are someday to become master craftsmen, masters of the light in the future, as we are children of the light today. From darkness our 20 masters of the light lead us to the light, from the darkness and color divisions of unconscious divinity into the pure white radiance of divine self-consciousness. But as I hold nirvana consciousness in the valleys of my being, as I remember the summits, while living on the plains, I can for the time being transcend time. There is, as long as the nirvana consciousness holds, no becoming, no dawning, no color, only a perfect radiance, beginningless and endless. It is thus that nirvana is bliss, and I know now why some great ones enfold themselves in it to the end of the age. It is a supreme consummation, and opens out a pathway of stupendous glory. I realize, too, that here is no selfishness. There could be none, of course, in entering nirvana and exploring it to the end, if and there be. To abide in nirvana, not to go forth therefrom, is a form of service to the world, for to enter nirvana is to make a channel between the world and nirvana, so that the world is one step nearer to the nirvanic dawn, and in some indescribable way the world is drawn into nirvana, or should I rather say becomes more nirvanic, because the sun of the world abides there. And 21 I look upon races, upon nations, upon peoples, upon faiths, upon communities, as colors in a universal spectrum, and yet each is spectrum in itself. I must study these colors, that I may the more purposefully serve. I see Australia. I see our Australian section, the sun nucleus of the Australian continent. I see the color scheme of things everywhere. I see that color matters infinitely, in the little things as well as in the big. For everywhere is a message as well as an individual growth. There is a message in the color of the clothes we wear, in the color of our furniture, of our objects of daily use, in our music and drama and painting, yes, and even in our magazine, Advance Australia. Does its blueprinting speak its message? Truly? Does not black printing convey less of God's message than color printing? I know the power of light, and therefore the power of color. The nirvanic light is power, not cold power, but blazing power, at least as I sensed it. And even the word power is a limitation, for I know now in a measure that I can begin to understand the meaning of the three great attributes of God: light, omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence. I see each color emerging from its 22 archetype, descending into darkness, ascending into light. At first faint, dim, crude, changing from shade to shade. The swinging of the pendulum of growth between the colors of darkness and the colors of light. Gradually, slowly, the fiercer hues of the colors of discord and of hatred mellow into the splendid shades of love. I know the universes to be color schemes. One universe a rose scheme, another a yellow scheme, a third a blue scheme, and so on. What is our color scheme? Rose? Perhaps, and yet its heart is the blinding, glorious light containing within itself all light rates within the mighty octave of its being. And now, in the light of further experience, I can begin to interpret traces, peoples, nations, faiths, communities, in terms other than of light, of color. I hear them all building their respective symphonies, resolving, slowly I am afraid, their inevitable discords into equally inevitable harmonies. And these various music strivings go to the building of the great world symphony, the basic note and chord of which is present in variations in every subdivision of the world, whether large or small. I have written of our universe as possibly a rose universe. Is our Earth a yellow 23 subdivision of the general rose scheme? What is the note of our universe, and what is the Earth's variant thereof? This is a most fascinating theme for study, but, as I am at present only in the region of speculation, guessing, imagining, it seems hardly profitable to pursue the investigation further. The point is that entry into nirvana is an approach to the basic things of being, those things which are omnipresent, and, from one point of view, changeless. Nirvana is omnipresent. Nirvana is present in color, in sound, in form, in substance. Nirvana is the essence of them all, or should I not rather say a form of the essence of them all, a fundamental mode of the root of their being? I am living in light eternity. I descend into a color time. Time is the breaking up of light eternal into color, and there is the light of the past, the light of the present, the light of the future. Yet all within an eternal now. The world seems new with a new sacredness. The power of the light is in all things. Through our very physical senses we touch the light which is divinity. It lies about us and in us as we have variations round a music note, or music theme or motif. So is the world 24, an almost infinite number of variations upon the theme of the universal light. It is a symphony of light. It is also a symphony of sound, and no less a symphony of silence. It is a symphony of color and of form. And there are those who, hearing the archetypal symphony, seek to mellow the harsh notes and cruder colors and forms of ignorance, so that the world orchestra, composed of all manifested life, as the musicians may, under the baton, the mighty rod of power of the world as supreme conductor, make music glorious, the archetype one with the actual. The process of evolution is a process of the individualization of light, on the way to re-universalization on the plane of self-consciousness. Music is light. Fire is light. The arts and the sciences are light, and evolution growing under the laws of light. The scriptures tell us of the light. There is a great gospel of the light, whence comes every faith, and to proclaim which comes every Savior. Light is right. Darkness is wrong. We grow towards the light as do the trees and flowers. I see our Lord the sun. In each of us is the heart, the sun of our body world. Does the blood reflect his rays? Are not all things light terms, like Formula 25? What is Nirvana? The light divine. I am touching, perhaps only for a moment, its lowest reaches, its densest layers. All I have written is but of the light divine, in its lowest nirvanic aspect. I cannot conceive down here even this glory, but it leaves in me, as I return to earth, a new perception of reality. I have taken a step nearer to the real. There is a greater comradeship in the world than I had thought, a deeper identity, a more glorious origin, a more glorious way, and a more glorious goal. Round me everywhere, and at all times, are God's sunshine messengers. Every color speaks his word and his voice. Every form breathes his purpose. I dust in the sunshine, yet am part of it, and looking upward to the sun I see the sign of my own divinity, and the embodied promise of my ultimate achievement. As is our Lord the sun, so shall we all be, for he has willed it so. Light is language, thought, vesture, and vehicle. A flash of light conveys for us down here a whole philosophy. The whole of this pitifully feeble amount of nirvanic experience was doubtless within a single flash of nirvanic light penetrating my being, or rather perhaps stirring at last from age-long dormancy within me. 26 Light is the will of the sun, the wisdom of the sun, the love of the Sunday. It is written in books that Nirvana is bliss. Even from that outermost region, at the frontiers, I know Nirvana to be infinitely more. Just one glimpse and all things seem to be made new. Within me and without me I remain, yet am wholly changed. And everything round me seems to be undergoing a process of revaluation. Even now, everything means far more than before. Every object, in every kingdom, seems in one way far more a shadow of reality, and a reality, for I perceive how feeble and inadequate must be all reflections of the light. I did not know, before, that they were so feeble. And yet, equally true is it that every object is far more real, far less of a shadow of reality, than I had thought. I see the present opportunity of form, and I perceive the shadows. I see the unfolding splendor of the light eternal, and I perceive the real. All other worlds are shadow worlds compared with this nirvanic world. And yet they are more real worlds because of this nirvanic world, for I now perceive the seal of God as purpose set upon all things, and I must reverence all things in far deeper measure than before. 27 Philosophers talk of pure being. I seem to be able to sense what pure being must be, not because I have contacted it, but because I have contacted that which is less short of pure being, and all other consciousness states I have so far experienced. At present, speaking, as a child in this new kingdom, Nirvana, to me is pure life, life which is light. Not that color has faded into this light. Color remains, but the spectrum of Nirvana is a glorification indescribable of the color spectra of the planes below. It is more light than color. Indeed, only, as I grow a little accustomed to the light, and my sensitiveness increases, beginning to adapt itself to its new environment, do I begin to perceive that within Nirvanic light are marvelous manifestations of color apotheosis, of color relationships, schemes, and interactions. For the moment, the sense of evolution is lost in the blinding glory of the light. As I become more at home in a home one never thinks to own until one enters at its doors, I shall realize, as I do not yet realize, that the eternal truth remains true, and becomes more true, that to enter the sunlight, which is another way of saying to love God, there is only one road, the service of that light which lighteth every man. 28. Thus, with a new power which I shall learn to use, do I seem to enter upon a deeper service. We are children of the sun, sparks of this glorious sunlight. I look up into the sky and I see my King. Sun worshippers worship more truly, perhaps, and they know. I, infinitesimal, ignorant and feeble, yes, even I, am a servant of the sun. As he shines upon the whole universe, so must I shine upon my world. I must be sunshine, even as he is sunshine. It is sometimes said that we cannot see God. I think I can see him in part, and know something of his sublimity, as I look upon the Sunday even, with my physical eyes. I know something of his glory, and the whole world around me is his glory in manifestation. But looking upon him from the Nirvanic world, I know far, far more. Another veil is lifted, and a fuller glory shines upon me. No words can express my new sense of him. It is, and must be, a mystery beyond words, beyond feeling, beyond even thought. Indeed, I must not even make the attempt, it is little short of blasphemy. But in the first epistle general of St. John, beginning at the 5th verse of the 1st chapter, it is written, "This then is the message which we have heard of him, and declare unto you, that God is 29 light, and in him is no darkness at all. If we say that we have fellowship with him, and walk in darkness, we lie, and do not the truth. But if we walk in the light, as he is in the light, we have fellowship one with another." And again in the 2nd chapter of the same epistle, beginning at the 9th verse, "He that saith he is in the light, and hateth his brother, is in darkness even until now. He that loveth his brother abideth in the light, and there is none occasion of stumbling in him." A simple message, but profoundly true. In him is no darkness at all, neither shadow of turning. Upon us all shines his light, perpetual. May we ever dwell in the light, through the service of our brethren. 30. Chapter 2. The first readjustment. I compare man's gradual progress in self-knowledge to his gradual decipherment of the nature and meaning of the sunshine which reaches him as light and heat indiscernibly intermingled. Myers, human personality, and the survival of bodily death. It is curious how, as the days pass, one becomes increasingly conscious of readjustment to one's surroundings, as well as of a perpetual contact with the non-physical. My relationships with outer things have altered. It may be that the buddhic unity has itself become intensified, for more of reverence seems due to everything, to inanimate as much as to animate objects. Indeed, I see clearly that there is nothing which is inanimate. All is animate with sunlight. All is alive with sun sound, with sun form. Even the minutest microcosm is a perfect macrocosm in miniature. The 31 pebble on the beach, the speck of dust, the least animate insect. God is not original. Having made his pattern, he never departs from it. Having chosen his pathway, he never diverges from it. This perception of the wonderful sameness of all things, which means that in essence all things are vibrant with infinite potentiality, causes an interesting and significant physical reaction to the outer world. I must lift things more carefully, deliberately. I must touch things with more refinement in the touch. I must use things with a greater sense of the purpose, to which there is no exaggeration in the statement. They are dedicated. Nothing slipshod or careless is tolerable. Let knowledge grow from more to more, but more of reverence in us dwell, that mind and soul, according well, may make one music, as before, but vaster. There is much profound truth in these lines. Through increased reverence the music does become vaster. I perceive divinity in the fountain pen with which I write these words. It seems unfair to the pen, indeed untrue to the essential being of the pen, if I do not try to write carefully and neatly. The pen suffers 32 other than physically if ill-treated. If used less reverently than it might be used. I seem to be under the necessity of educating, of cooperating with my surroundings all the time, largely by my general attitude, but in no small measure by my moreover comradeship with the things that constitute them. My office tools depend upon me, look up to me. All this may be the intensification of the buddhic principle, but it is more than this. Am I getting nearer to the truth when I suggest that the unity of buddhi is more an outward, forth-going process, while the unity of nirvana is more an inward, indrawing process? Do I at the buddhic stage perceive my oneness with the world, and at the nirvanic stage perceive the potentiality of all things within me? I think there is something of this kind, for our Lord the Sun seems at the nirvanic stage to become the center of my being. On further contemplation, it seems as if at the buddhic stage one goes out to find a unity, while at the nirvanic stage one begins to realize it everywhere. At the buddhic stage one travels from center to circumference, finding the center as much at the circumference as at the center, if you understand what I am trying to convey. At the nirvanic stage, 33, that which has been two, and yet one in two, becomes one. All is center, and one is on the verge of the conception that under a certain mode of consciousness a center need have no circumference, for all is within the center. We draw circumferences just as we draw double lines for easier writing. But we do not need them, and nirvana is the state of doing without them. At the buddhic stage there is more of realization. At the nirvanic stage there is more of being. As I have already written, the sun seems to be my king, and I realize that down here I must be a son, the son of my world, as he is the son of his system. In him is the source of all life. In me, too, is the source of all life, because I am in him, and of his being. His rays pervade worlds. Do not mine, however feebly, pervade a world. I am an infinity in the becoming, because I am infinity in essence. Nothing is lacking in my nature to that stupendous end. The word end is, of course, absurd. I am light even as he is light. The nirvana consciousness seems to produce a cognition of oneself as a throbbing, pulsating energy, or power nucleus, slowly but surely expanding, extending its kingdom far and wide, and itself becoming more and more 34 radiant as its frontiers are pushed forward into space. I can conceive that in the infinitely distant future my body shall be, as the sun, and my kingdom a universe. I am brought face to face with my potentiality, and with its inevitable growth into power. It is a marvelous and stupendous grandeur, omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, in the becoming. I enter my sanctum sanctorum. I enter the essence of my being. I perceive a burning, blinding sun, a miniature of the sun himself. It seems to me also that I am in constant contact with all outside me. This is probably a way of putting the fact that I am conscious on the plane of universal consciousness, on which time and space are non-existent. An act of consciousness, and I contact whatever I desire to.